You might be thinking, oh no, here comes a video that's gonna tell me not to consume caffeine. Just what I need is another person telling me not to have my cup of coffee. Look, I am a real person. I love caffeine and I use it, and I use it effectively, and I get a lot out of it. And I think the reason I get so much out of it is because I have an understanding of how it's acting in my brain, why it's so addicting, and with that, I can sort of manipulate my usage of it. So I hope to share that with you so you can maintain the enjoyment of caffeine, coffee, tea, while having an understanding of why it's so addicting in the first place, but also use that to your advantage. Let's go ahead and dive in. Today's video is brought to us by Apex Protein Snacks. It is what is called biltong. Biltong is air-dried meat. So it's not like regular jerky where the drying process is super accelerated and leaves it very tough. Biltong is air-dried. So Apex has some tremendous flavors, okay? They've got some ones that are going to be spicy, they've got their peri-peri, they've got their original, they've got their teriyaki. All of them are gluten-free. They don't use soy sauce. They use really good, wholesome ingredients. And if you look at the ingredient list, you're gonna see there's no hidden weird stuff in there. It's all very straight up, very straightforward. One of the cleanest, leanest, simplest sources of protein that you can get on the go. Plus, it tastes unbelievable. I'm serious, like very, very unbelievable. Some of their spicy ones have a serious kick though, so use some caution there. Anyway, that link down below will save you some cashola on Apex Biltong. So that link is in the top line of the description right underneath this video. Check them out. Dopamine. It's like a buzzword right now, right? It's like ever since Andrew Huberman started talking about dopamine, we're all experts in dopamine. And anyway, it's interesting because dopamine is very complex and we barely understand it. But some of the things that we do know is that it is helping us understand the relationship between immediate past and present. It's always a balance of what just happened and what our response is. So someone compliments you on the street. It feels good and you get an energy perk from it, right? You do something that gives you reward. You taste something, you eat something, you get immediate reward, and you even get an energy perk from it. Someone gives you $100, you're gonna feel really good, right? That's dopamine in action. So what we're starting to see in the research is that, well, does caffeine actually increase dopamine? Now, what we've seen is that when subjects consume caffeine, they do have an increase in dopamine. But what we do not know is if caffeine is directly stimulating dopamine or if it's indirect. Because what caffeine does is it blocks the adenosine receptor in our brain, and the adenosine receptor normally receives adenosine, which makes us tired. So when we block that receptor, adenosine cannot dock, and that means we stay awake. So is it the interference of the adenosine receptor that's triggering dopamine, or is it the caffeine itself? Is it a mechanistic attribute of caffeine? That we do not know. But if we look at a study that was published in the journal Translational Psychiatry, we learned something very illuminating. We learned that caffeine increases the availability of the D2, dopamine 2, and D3, dopamine 3 receptor. So what that means is we now have more places that we can catch dopamine. Let me explain this for a second. If I give you $100 and you have 5 dopamine receptors, all 5 dopamine receptors are gonna receive a hit from dopamine and you're gonna feel elated and feel great. If you have 20 dopamine receptors and I give you $100, that $100 is going to feel even better. It's gonna feel 4 times better because you have more places to catch dopamine. Otherwise, extra dopamine has to kind of go through a reuptake and all this, and it's a whole different ball game. So by increasing dopamine receptor availability, we leave ourselves much more susceptible to the impact of reward, which is what makes caffeine so dang addicting. Because not only do we actually get a nice feeling and dopamine hit from caffeine, caffeine makes everything we do feel a little better. So if I give you caffeine and then give you $100, you might feel better than I just gave you $100, right? So pretty interesting stuff there. Now what we have to look at is the ritualistic nature of caffeine in the first place and how much we enjoy that. So people say, you know, I don't really need the caffeine. I just like the ritual of having my cup of coffee. Or I just love sipping on something. It just feels good. That's great. A lot of us love that. But what ends up happening is because of the D2 and D3 dopamine receptor availability increase, the ritualistic nature feels even better. So that ritualistic thing that you get out of it is only feeling so good because you also have the dopamine receptor availability increase. So you have a double whammy. So we're talking major fireworks early in the day for a lot of people, major dopamine fireworks. And because it's now making everything else feel good, you're looking through the world in sort of rose-colored glasses or caffeine-colored glasses. Does this mean caffeine's bad? No, but it means it's a distorted life view in some ways, and it means that you are falling victim to how it makes you feel, which makes it extremely addictive. So how do you counteract that? Well, we must remember that dopamine doesn't take a really long time to sort of refresh. So we can get by after a few days and allow our dopamine receptor sort of sensitivity to kind of come back to baseline. It takes longer than that wholeheartedly, but you can notice a difference in a few days. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that caffeine becomes a tool. So once caffeine becomes the ritual, it's become habit, it's become nature, and it's become part of life where we do truly get addicted to it. It's okay to see caffeine as an ergogenic aid. There are probably not any more researched ergogenic aids than caffeine. Like, caffeine is the most well-vetted ergogenic performance, both mental and physical aid that is out there. It's the most documented. So we know it works well for fat loss. We know it works well for mental alertness. We know it works well for mood, but only if we maintain the integrity of it. So what you really want to do is you want to lower your baseline caffeine so that when you need caffeine, you can use it more effectively. And also, the more sensitive you are to caffeine, the quicker you're likely to metabolize it and get it out of your system too, in a lot of ways, in certain situations. So what that would mean is if you were to go every other day caffeine, you put yourself in a spot to maintain the effectiveness of the caffeine. Here's what I recommend you do. Set a number that is your top line amount of caffeine you want to have. I'm just going to say 50 milligrams because that's like a nice big cup of green tea. 50 milligrams of caffeine is going to be my baseline caffeine amount. I have that every other day. Okay, so one big cup of green tea every other day. This isn't me personally, this is just what I'm describing. Okay, then on the days that you need more caffeine, you bump that up to 100 or you bump that up to 150. Okay, so by going every other day, you allow yourself to kind of maintain dopamine receptor sensitivity, and you're not having this huge effect. Then you're allowing yourself to use caffeine as a tool on the days that you need it and get an exacerbated effect. Because there is cognitive impairment that comes with the downside of caffeine. So once caffeine hits your system and then starts to come out, you have a micro withdrawal that actually impairs cognitive function. So you kind of have this constant seesaw. But if caffeine is something that you have strategically, you're going to have a bigger impact with it for a longer period of time. So the strategy here is every other day, develop a baseline number, and then increase the amount on the days that you need it. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.